Hi all, thanks for joining. Today I have with me very special guest, Mudit. Mudit is from Automation Anywhere. He has close to 18 years of experience in working into IT industry. He started his journey how a techie would do as a developer. From that level, now he is a principal product manager working with Automation Anywhere. So today we are going to touch base upon document automation with GenAI. What are the capabilities that document automation can address to and can solve the problem related to the extraction. For more, let me hand it over to Mudit. Mudit, welcome to this session. Excited to have you.
Thank you, Dipendra. Really appreciate you having me here and super excited to be here with your audience. So just a quick background, what I've been up to. I'm principal product manager for Automation Anywhere. I've been working with the company for the last 3 years. I'm owning the document automation product portfolio and, more recently working on adding generative AI related capabilities into that. Prior to that, I've also got close to now 14 years of product management experience in different product areas. So, I'm more focused right now on, as I said, making generative AI and available in context of IDP use cases. And that's what we'll focus on today. I'm very happy to be here to showcase some of our new tech that's available in the product and to talk about it in more detail with you and your audience.
Super cool. Thanks for quickly introducing yourself. So we'll directly jump on the agenda. The audience would be excited to know what's there like in today's session.
Yeah. All right. So the focus of today's session, as I talked about, would be on document automation with generative AI. And what I've done here is taken one specific document type, which, most of you would know is unstructured documents, right? So things like emails, contracts, where you have predominantly a blob of text as content. So generative AI has made a huge inroad in that specific use case, and you can really use that capability that's within the foundation models to serve extraction for these document types, right? And I'm happy to talk about some of the complex use cases there and how generative AI is playing a role, making it easier for organizations to really address those use cases. In terms of the agenda, we've gone through the introduction. Now what I'll do is I'll give a brief overview of document automation, of all of the capabilities that it has, sort of a 10,000 feet view, and then specific to the generative AI capabilities, we'll double click on that. We'll deep dive into all the different areas within generative AI and how that sort of comes alive with reference to specific use cases that I was talking about in context of unstructured documents. Right. I will talk about that as well. And what I'll be doing here specifically first, before I get into the details of it, what I'll do is I'll talk about what are these core capabilities today as it exists and how they play a role in unstructured documents, in semi-structured documents today, how that's it. And also sort of talk about some of the plan that we have for the future in terms of these capabilities, how they will evolve to serve these use cases in future. And, I'd be happy to give you a sneak peek of that as well. And then we'll do a product demo where I'll spend significant amount of time on the unstructured document use cases, explaining how it's so much more simpler with generative AI now, right, to be able to really just extract content out of any field, any sort of complex table, you name it, right? So we'll go into deep details on that, and then we'll round it off with a Q&A towards the end. Right, so that's the agenda.
Awesome. Yeah, it looks a quite packed agenda, and I think audience would be excited to see all those demos that you have, especially for the unstructured document. So there are a lot of queries regarding the data extraction from the unstructured documents. So yeah,
Sure.
Excited to see the demo that you have. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Please proceed.
Yeah. All right. So quickly, just a few slides here, and I think document automation as a capability, and some of you may already be familiar with it, but just to explain this, in context of what we do. So the focus of this capability is primarily around intelligent document processing, and we've got a platform approach to solving this problem, right? To be able to extract data from different document types. We've realized early on that as Automation Anywhere, we will have certain capabilities of our own. What we've done and we've invested in is an open architecture which allows us to plug in any external capability, including generative AI, and use it to really power the extraction that you want to have for different documents, right? We have partnerships also with Google Document AI. We have partnerships with Microsoft Forms Recognizer, now also called Microsoft Document Intelligence. And that basically unlocks for you this ability to extract practically any document type. And our customers benefit from that tremendously because we have all of these different capabilities with one single with one single capability. They're able to really address so many different sort of use cases for which otherwise they would have to invest in separately, right? In addition to this open architecture, we also have a pre-built workflow, which basically means, and let me talk about that in my next slide here. So when you think of document automation, what you really get is this predefined process flow, which is available for you to use, right? So you can easily ingest documents from different sources, right? Once that's available with document automation, after ingestion, we do within our own ecosystem, we have these specific capability that will allow us to enhance the images, because not every document would come pre-processed, so it sometimes need pre-processing so that you get the most optimal results. Again, you don't need to worry about it. It's available. We have our own classification and splitting capability. If it needs to be done, you can sort of easily do that as well. And then the core extraction and validation, which is available as a process flow, you can use that. So extraction, as I said, we've got multiple technologies that are out there. Some of it powered by our partner ecosystem, some of it our own, and now with our own capabilities, we've also augmented that with generative AI, both for semi-structured use case and unstructured use cases, right? So all of this is available for you to use. We've also, not many people know this, but we've also got a very open architecture where we've enabled a certain SDK for developers to use to bring their own parser. So if you've got an engine or you've got your own capability that you think you can leverage in context of powering your use cases for yourself or for your customers, you can definitely leverage this SDK, what we call as bring your own parser. You can also be looking at doing that. Now, all of these extractions, once they are done, you would go ahead and route it for validation, because not everything can be extracted 100% of the time. So sometimes you may need to have human in the loop, and there is a dedicated console and a dedicated screen for your users to be able to validate those documents. And then once that is done, all of these data essentially is processed and goes further down into your system of records, as the case may be, right? It could be your ERP, it could be your CRM, whatever your system is configured to use. So that's sort of an overarching view of document automation as a capability. And let me go to the next screen. In terms of generative AI and how this has really shook this particular space, I would say, right? Intelligent document processing is really a space. We've got many large players operating in this space, different sort of automation players operating in this space. But generative AI, I think, has had a very, very massive impact on this space particularly. And early on, it was quite evident that some of the use cases which earlier would take a significant amount of time are no longer out of reach, right? So for example, for us, we realized this very quickly that unstructured documents can easily be extracted using generative AI. In addition, if you give specific context to the extractions, then the large language models can also be used even for your structured and semi-structured use cases. And I'll try to demonstrate that in a specific use case when we look at the demo. So both, it can work really to handle complex unstructured data. It can also work very well to sort of play an augmentation role or a pure play extraction role for your semi-structured and structured document use cases, right? And what's happening also, because we've seen the GenAI come into picture, the time to value earlier, if you got to extract a particular document type, many a times you were forced to sort of train for it. Many a times you were forced to set up your configurations for it. But with generative AI, it's as simple as defining a natural language prompt, right? Just a simple prompt can do the job for you. As I'm talking right now, you can practically talk to your system, explain what your ask is, and that's where it takes off. So again, what that means for you and for your customers is that the amount of time that it used to take earlier would no longer be required. The time to value is much lower, and you can extract high value in a very short period of time, right? What we're also seeing in the space is that there is so much innovation happening, and I'm sure your audiences would be aware of, and you are also experiencing this. There's so many foundation models that are being created. They're fine-tuned models coming up. So we see this happening very, very fast, and I think this breed of new models that are coming in will continue to make the extraction much more simpler, much more faster, much more easier to set up. One other call out, because a lot of times people ask us this question, hey, what's your stand on open source large language models? So generally speaking, we see that the open source large language models would have like a 6 to 9 months lag in terms of purely the performance and the accuracy numbers that you may expect from them versus, say, a closed source model. But they're definitely catching up. That's happening today, and it's definitely expected to grow further in that direction, right? All right. With that, let me go into where we are today, right? So if you look at our space, as I was explaining, in terms of different documents that you deal with, you've got structured documents on one side, things like forms, right? Very simple, very well structured, defined tables, everything's clean. To the other side, where you have unstructured documents, right? Where essentially you're dealing with lots of text, emails, contracts are great examples of that. And then somewhere in the middle is semi-structured documents where you've got some content, textual content, and then you've also got a bunch of tables and some relatively semi-structured content as well. A typical example of that would be something like an invoice or a purchase order or even bill of lading, right? So those sort of documents, right? So the way we've used generative AI today is that when it comes to the unstructured documents, the primary extraction comes from large language models, and we use that to our advantage. We made it super easy for developers to set it up, right? You can practically define what we call as search queries at a field level and get your extraction going in like few minutes. Again, I'll show that in the demo. It's very simple, very easy to do, right? Then what we got here is that for semi-structured and structured documents, essentially what we do is we use large language models today in an augmentation mode. So we let our core technologies that I talked about earlier, either powered by us or some of it powered by our partners, we use those extractions. And then what we will have is that we will have situations where the extraction is not fully complete or is not, of a high confidence. And what we do there is that we sort of use an augmentation mode where we say, okay, for these specific fields, let's look at what the large language model has to say. And if there is an option available there, then we use that to power the extraction, right? So in this context, the extraction models and the feedback that you've given does play a role. But what you would tend to have is that, let's say 6 out of 10 fields were extracted by your core models, then the remaining 4 can potentially come from the large language model. So if you were getting 60% accuracy, maybe now you're getting 90% because you've got GenAI at play. So again, the degree of use varies. So, augmentation mode versus exclusive GenAI extraction. And like I said, the way we bifurcated it is in terms of the use case that's at play, and that's how it is structured today. Right now, how this is evolving, the question does come in here. Is this how it's going to be, or things are changing now? Of course, they're changing. They're always changing with Gen AI, as you can imagine. Now, how we see this evolving into the future is that we're making it possible. We're seeing that many customers come to us, many use cases we are seeing can benefit from Gen AI extraction, even in the semi-structured and structured document scenario. And we will make that choice available to customers where they can take a call. Okay, for these specific set of fields, I would like a Gen AI response rather than using any of the extraction technologies. And that's something that give them that freedom to sort of make that choice. That's coming actually very soon in the next release that should be out there. Then the other thing which we are also seeing is we are now finding that the models have evolved. Now you've got GPT-4, GPT-4o, which are multimodal in nature. So they have an ability to not just look at the content or read that content, but they can see the content, right? There is a vision capability that's available with them. And in context of the response that we are getting when that is available, the accuracy is far higher, right? In those use cases, we are finding that. So especially for a lot of the complex use cases, complex tables, nested tables, complex tables, links tables. So just to name a few examples, what our view is that multimodal capabilities would play a significant role in those use cases, and semi-structured documents and structured documents can tremendously benefit from that. So again, we expect that to happen. And today what I'll do, to a degree, I'll try to show some examples of where large language models are already playing a role in that. And we certainly expect this to grow further with these vision capabilities that are going to be available. And I think in general, this holds true for all of the newer capabilities as well as the future capabilities that players like OpenAI and Anthropic are investing into. What we see is that the context window is no longer going to be a limitation. Today, if some of the earlier models that are out there had a very limited context window, whereas now the context window is going to be fairly high. There's 100K tokens, 200K tokens are going to be the norm. And then we've also heard of some of the models coming up with 1 million token, which means it can practically handle very large documents, and it will have the entire context available for it to be processing those documents, right? So again, that's something that we expect to happen. For unstructured documents specifically, as I said, the vision capability is one of the things that I'm super excited about. Is with vision capabilities, you can not just query, for example, content, but you can also say, okay, here's a, if you see this graph, tell me what this is, right? Or what's the trend being projected on sales by quarter? And if there's a graph embedded somewhere, you can practically look at that, and you can actually make queries and ask questions around that, and that also can be extracted, and not just pure play textual content or table content, right? You can really go far beyond what's possible today. And a lot of unstructured documents, think of like credit reports, right? Financial statements, many a times annual reports, right? Things like those would have graphical objects embedded in them, and we expect vision capabilities to play a role on those use cases as well.
Yeah, really cool stuff coming up. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. With that, I will get into the product demo now, and super excited to talk about the specific use cases. So how I've divided this demo is that there are two themes we'll focus on in the demo. One is around the unstructured document. So pure unstructured document where there is a large amount of textual content. We'll see how easy it is to set up that with document automation and start your extraction with literally a few clicks, right? And then the other thing, what we'll also do is we'll look at some complex documents, right, where traditional engines really struggle. They're also unstructured documents. So I've got a specific receipt example, which kind of mirrors an unstructured document. So I'll use that to showcase this as an example that, hey, this is an example where even though you may think that, the traditional engine would work and you are often disappointed with it, but then, GenAI can play a significant role on those complex documents and be able to address those use cases as well. Okay, so these are the two themes, and that, let me switch off.
Awesome. I'm super excited. I think audience would be too.
So what we'll do is first we'll go through I'll just take you through the examples of the documents that we'll be dealing with, and then it'll help set the context, right? So this is an email that's there in there. So if you see here, this is an order that I placed with IKEA, right? And it has a certain set of information available about the order. And then I had to write it back to them that, hey, I placed your order, but I want to cancel it because it does not meet my requirement. And I had an interaction with the customer support, right? So what we'll do with this example is we'll process this email. We'll try to extract specific content, right? And we'll, when that extraction is done, we'll try to also change our search queries or prompts and see different outcomes, right? So that's really the flow, what I'll be demonstrating today. Right. So in the interest of time, what I've done here is I've got this learning instance set up already. Just for your audience, in case some of you are not aware, setting up a learning instance is very simple. You click on this button, and what you got here is if you select the unstructured document. So, you will have these options available to power your extraction with generative AI. And you can select again OpenAI and Anthropic. These are two capabilities that are integrated into the product today and are available. So now what you can do here is all you got to do simply is you can say, okay, I'm going to extract a sample email. I can go ahead and then I can simply add fields here, right? So let's say I'm going to extract order date.
And Mudit, sorry to interrupt you, but this option is available for people in Community Edition if they want to try it.
So no, this particular option is on the enterprise version. So we are looking at expanding as part of our roadmap and serve it on community as well. Obviously, there'll be some restrictions, but we would definitely want to have that available for product.
So at the moment, they can just go ahead and create it in Community Edition, except for the Gen AI feature.
That's
other capabilities are already exposed, right?
All correct. Other capabilities.
Thank you.
So now, what is the order date? Again, this is an example of a default query, but then I can change it. I can say, hey, what is the order date? For DD MMYY, right? When returning the response. So I can do this kind of changes, right? And I can set up my learning instances, and I can have this extraction power, right? So I'm not going to create this from afresh. I've already got this available here, and I will use this learning instance to showcase how this extraction would work. So let's say I'm extracting a sample email. In this case, as you saw, this has order number, order date. So I already got this available here, order number, order date. I'm also asking, what is the email purpose? What is this about? And then let's say I want to understand the sentiment of this email. Like, is it positive? Is it negative? How is it, right? I want to just get a sense of that. I want to see if there is a phone number available. So if you see in my particular example, there is a phone number available. So I'm going to use that and see if I can get that extraction done as well. The other thing which I want to extract is, okay, when did this email come? So the automated email came at this time, for example, and this is the time when I had a response. I wanted to understand the time difference, right? So I've just given it a title, email time difference, and let's see what extraction we get out of this, right? And this is just a temp field. I want to make sure that it comes into our validation queue. So I've kept this at without generative AI at 100 confidence so that we will see this in our validation screen, how the extraction is, right? So let's process this now and let's see response we get.
So usually how much time it takes for processing a document?
Right. It varies anywhere between, can be as quick as 30 seconds to a minute per page, usually, right? It's not tremendously high. So if you see, the extraction now is running on my virtual machine, and it's a single page. I'm hoping it should be pretty quick. Right, so let's see that. So this extraction would come in. Yeah, it went through. So
the view that we get in the DA, the bot is running and it's processing. It's something new, right? We have got in this version.
Yeah. So this is a new, so it tends to show the progress. I think you refer to the progress of the execution. If you're showing the progress, it's something that's relatively new.
It's really helpful. Otherwise, in the previous version, it was all like a single bar without any progress, like extracting or working on your request, something like that. So that's a really cool improvement, or the feature that is available in this version.
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah. All right. So now if you see the data that it has extracted, and I've just used the default prompts, I've not changed anything here, right? So there is a default prompt that I've used and it has extracted the order number correctly, right? It has extracted the date of order correctly. So far so good. But then if I look at some of the other things, okay, there is an email purpose, which is fine. Sentiment of email is not looking correct. It seems to be something that's not correct. The phone number is able to be extracted. Email time difference, right? So again, this is something that you see here. So if you see, I sent it at 1:56 and then I responded at 9:40. So this is roughly 7-8 hours, I think, but the extraction seems to be doing some different calculation. So what we'll do now is we will iterate on this and we will change this learning instance so that we have a different sort of response, right? So I'm going to ask now a specific question here. So this is my prompt. I've already have this available. So I'm just going to use this so we'll change this and we'll make it more specific. We'll say, hey, give us the response and classify it into positive, negative, or neutral, and nothing else, right? So we'll have this. Yeah, some of the other things we can also do, for example, in customer phone number, if I'm just interested in the mobile number part of it, right? Because it's, for example, showing me the complete code, I can just simply change it to mobile number and it should understand that it's a mobile number that it should extract and to extract that. On the email time difference, again, we will use this as a prompt and I'll explain this prompt after I copied it here.
So you're giving pointed prompts basically, and you might have done this like optimize this prompt, right? It comes through multiple iterations. Like the user have to try and test it.
Correct. Absolutely. So the way and to do that is like, let's say let me just explain this prompt and I'll explain how the iterative changes you can do. One of the things that I'm doing here, for example, with this prompt is that I'm telling it very specifically what is this time difference, right? What is the definition of what I'm asking for? So as I would explain a person, I'm explaining that when was the automated email sent by this particular email and the reply received. And also I'm expecting a format, although format was not really an issue, but I'm specifying the format here and I'm asking it to explain the calculation if it can, right? We'll see what result we get out of that. So once I've done all of these updates and I just simply update my learning instance, right? I can come here and I could do this iteratively. I could have, Dipender, to your point earlier, which is very important. Most of the time when as devs, we would actually do this, we would change one field and simply click on reprocess it. And what it will do is every time you do a change, it will take the latest learning instance information or the configuration and rerun your extraction and it will present the results, right? So in this case, I did a bunch of changes and I'm now running it, but you can practically do it one at a time to,
so that particular record can be reprocessed right there. Like we don't need to go through the entire cycle again.
Exactly. And we'll see this now. I'm doing this. So this will run through on the VM. I should be running the bot. And once it's done, we will see the results.
And does your bot runner also takes those package like pre-configured so that for the next run, it consumes it from there? Maybe a cache, kind of global cache?
We can set it up like that. Yes, absolutely. It can be set.
So it's a first time it would take usually more time? compared to the subsequent runs.
Yes. So document automation package in general, it's pretty large actually. So anytime you are using the document automation for your extraction, the first extraction you do on a bot runner, the very first, you can expect it to take, upward of 5 minutes, 5, 6 minutes. It'll take time. But then subsequently on that bot runner, it should be pretty quick. Then it's
Got
not
it.
really loading the package.
Got it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, if you see here, we've got this differences coming in, and some of it is meeting my requirement here. I asked it to classify it into email, and it's giving me a negative,
Negative. Yeah.
right? And it's giving me, for example, my mobile number. In this case, I was expecting
Mm.
it. I can now go and further. Now I see that I
Yeah.
only want this, right? So I can
Correct.
now go, and if I wanted to, I could go and further change this and say, hey, exclude the country code, right?
Yeah.
And don't
Yeah.
don't mention that. Now,
Correct.
email difference, if you see, is coming absolutely correct. 8 hours 44 minutes, right down to the second. It's
Mhm.
now what's happening here is, and another thing also is that you've got to keep in mind that the system is always looking at the entire content. So when in this previous example, like it was coming something else and now it's coming correctly, it's because I've given it a very specific instruction. Now, if you see earlier, what it was doing is there was another timestamp here. So probably it was looking at and using this timestamp and doing the calculation, and the format was completely different, right? Maybe it
Mhm.
was completely following its own format in terms of the response, right?
Yeah.
But now, because we are very specific and we are specified that, it's gone ahead and actually looked at that content and answered accordingly.
So, Mudit, do you suggest any best practices here? Like in terms of there would be a lot of developers in the team or professionals working together as a part of a same solving the a same piece of the puzzle, right? So,
Right.
are there any specific prompt guidelines that under that they should work, or it's like a hit and trial? What's your
Right.
view on
Yeah.
that? Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, see, what you have to be, the intent of what you're trying to do has to come out very, very clearly, right? So think of it like this. If you have a textual content available with you as a person, right, and somebody tells you that find the response or the timestamp for when the email was sent, right, and you can be more specific on that, and you can say, okay, if that doesn't work, you can further fine tune it and say, okay, I expect this time to be just after the email address, right? Or adjacent to email address, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the more pointed you are in your requirement or your explanation, the finer the results you would get, right? But then I think the trade-off is that, see, practically we all deal with a batch of documents, right? We're not being, like in this example, I'm obviously keeping the prompt general, right? If you see in this particular example, what I did is I said, hey, pick up and again, let me just go back to the prompt to talk about it. So if you see this, what I had to say was that, okay, this is when was the automated email sent from this, and this particular email address, and when the reply was received, right? So I was a little fine grained in this. A good approach is, when you're defining these prompts, consider the variety of documents that you're dealing with, right? So you can say that, okay, for example, here a good prompt could be the first email's time and then the subsequent email time, right? So you can generalize your prompt to cater to a broad spectrum of your documents, right? So that's
Yeah.
one best practice. Definitely that's there. But then we do understand, like, it's up to you, right? There will be situations where you need to be more fine tuned, like you need a granular prompt because your ask is such, right? But then if you're dealing with a batch of documents, generally come up with prompts and instructions which can scale to meet the requirements of your batch of documents. So that's something that I would highly recommend. Otherwise, the other thing also is test it, like testing and tuning it over a period of time with a bunch of documents. So always when you're looking at defining your prompts, don't just consider like 2 or 3 documents. Maybe take a typical workload of your 15-20 documents and see what's the impact on that. That will give you a sense, how good or how accurately this prompt is really working.
Got it.
Does that make
Got it.
sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks.
All right. So now what we'll do is we will switch to the next use case. And in the next use case, I've got an insurance policy document. Let me bring that up here for you quickly. So this is an insurance policy document. And as you can expect, there are a bunch of clauses. There is a table available here. And I've chosen this on purpose because if you see, there is no header on this table, right? It's a headerless table, as we call it, right? So it is from a table perspective as well. It's a bit complex for systems to understand. They can understand, but it's a little bit complex. And then there are, like I said, there are a bunch of these clauses that are here, right? So what we'll do is in my learning instance, I've got a I'm extracting for specific clauses. I'm also asking it sublimits NA, right? So what is sublimits NA? I think these are the limits that are there. As you know, in insurance terminology, you would have specific guidelines. In this context, whenever there is a sublimit that does not apply above, right? So this is an example of wherever sublimit is not applicable. So I've just given it, hey, give me all the specific content around wherever sublimits are not applicable, right? So that's what I'm trying to extract it here. A mental illness cover, again, I want to understand if what's the cover around that. So I will have that mentioned here as a particular search query here as well. Right now, let's do, by the way, the other point also to highlight here for your audience, like, see, you can use the rules and validations to your advantage when dealing with generative AI. Depender, I think that's very important to understand here is that if you are expecting a certain sort of response and you want to validate that, the ability to set up the field level rules can actually play a very, very important role in making your use cases more robust. So I would again highly recommend that also as a best practice. If you have the specific requirements, you can put in these validations, and that should help you make sure that nothing goes into your system of records that's not up to the mark.
Yep.
So then let me just process this document now and see what results we get.
And these are pretty standard, right? For any type of Mediclaim policies. This is a pretty standard document.
Absolutely. Yeah. So claims, contracts, all of these are fairly standard. I mean, unstructured are typical examples of unstructured ready use cases. So this is, again, the extraction has started now. It'll take a bit of time, and we should get to see the result. We'll wait for it.
Meanwhile, it's processing. I've got one question. It's
Yep.
mostly in the Indian context. For example, like we have these documents, right? PAN card or Aadhaar card. Mostly, there are a lot of KYC processes being done at the moment. So most of them are automated, but still, what are the chances? Like I remember doing one use case with IQBot, and there were certain challenges while extracting the information.
Yep.
So would you mind sharing your thought? How has it improved with respect to DA?
Right. So PAN card is another great example. Like you mentioned, it does not have field labels to it, right? You have a PAN number, you have the person's name, and you have probably the date. There's some date that's there, right? Date of birth, right? So you just have that. But if you see a PAN card, it doesn't have any label, right? So in a template-based approach, or where you're sort of using a templatized model to train for it, right? You would have to sort of point and click, get the extraction done much more positionally. Whereas you can also use generative AI in such use cases. Definitely, it's something that you will find it works with very, very high accuracy. Generative AI model understands what a PAN number is. You don't have to train it. It understands what a date of birth is, right? It understands what a name or first name or a last name is. So it will give you very high predictability, in terms of the results that you're getting. So I feel, definitely some of those use cases probably are also going to benefit from, generative AI based extraction.
Okay. Yeah. Cool.
Now, this is, as you can see, the extraction of the clauses. It's all fine. I think I got what I was looking for. I can see the sublimits NA seems to be also extracting correctly, right? Which is what I wanted it to extract. So yeah, it looks like this is really working well. Now, if you see the mental health cover here, for example, it seems to be extracting correctly. But let's say I'm also interested in extracting not just my mental illness cover, but I also want to extract, let's say, the exclusions that are there, right? So what we will do is, let's say I'm just going to change this now, and I'm going to focus on just the exclusion bit, right? So I'm going to say, okay, what are the mental illness cover exclusions? And I'm going to extract that. So again, I make this quick change, and let's see. So the reason why this is, again, you may ask me why you want to extract. So if you see here, this section is very clearly titled mental illness cover, right? Now we are, nowhere does it say this is just marked as an exclusion, right? But the power of large language model is that, hey, it will understand the context, like the language that's available here, and the fact that, this is actually related to mental exclusion without you having to explicitly state it, right? So this is making that connection on its own. It has nothing to do with positional. I mean, there is probably some element of positional content being available positionally here, but it's really more about the fact that it clearly is about a mental illness, and it is related to that exclusion criteria on that. So it's making sense of that, and it will answer that question for you, and that's why you'll get pretty good response, right? So again, we'll see how this goes. But okay, another thing I completely forgot to talk about, but if you see, we were talking about how this is a headerless table, right? So again, we were able to extract this table, right, without absolutely zero training. So if you see here, this table's coming out pretty well. It is extracting the heads, the applicable conditions, and the best thing is, absolutely, there's no other than the fact that I've mentioned here, these heads, these table headers of my own, these don't exist. Like in the actual document,
Yeah.
if I go and see, there is no table header whatsoever,
So
right?
based on the
But
context, it classified and
it
it itself
is
came up with those names.
exactly. So this is something that again can be very, very super useful for you. And let me now just reprocess it and see based
So
on whether
Mudit,
we'll be
one
able
more
to get the
question.
exclusion. Yeah,
Yeah,
please.
one more question is like we have like how to use, for example, if you are building a learning instance,
Mhm.
I want to use maybe a Gen AI for certain fields, not for the entire field of the documents. So is
Right.
that a provision we can have the hybrid approach?
Yes, yes, absolutely. So if you look at this, I can go ahead at a field level. I can define whether I want GenAI to play a role or not, right? I can choose to enable or disable GenAI, right? Now,
Hmm.
this is in this particular example, I'm doing unstructured, right? The primary model or
Yeah,
mode of extraction is GenAI.
yeah.
But let's say I was doing a invoice use case, which is
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right. If I was doing an invoice use case, I can set it up to be okay. This is I don't want to use for specific field GenAI. I can choose to sort of simply remove that. And then what will happen in that case is the extraction model using all the setup that's already available in the system and the model that is available in general, or even your
Mm-hmm.
feedback, it will use that to power the extraction and will not use generative AI. So yeah, definitely something that is possible. You definitely decide that at a per field.
Okay. Per field level, we need to toggle that. And is it a
Correct.
toggle all option available? For example, at once I want to uncheck all. I mean, just too
Yeah,
much
no, no.
question.
So you can do that. I mean, you can. So in this, like I said, in this particular example, this is all highly unstructured. But let's say I don't know if I have one. I
Mm-hmm.
have this invoice, right? So I
Mm-hmm.
can go ahead and I can say, okay, I can go ahead and simply turn it off here. It will apply to all the fields, right?
It will apply to all the fields. Okay, awesome.
Good, good. Yeah. Just a call out though for unstructured, because that's the primary use case or primary extraction model, you would not be able to do that. But for other use cases, you can definitely do it. I hope that makes sense,
Got
right?
it.
All right. So then with this, our extraction should have gone through. And let's see what exclusion. Now you can see this is picking up the exclusion on its own. Again, something
Mm-hmm.
that it's able to understand the specific language and put it under mental illness cover exclusion, which is great, which is what we wanted, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, this is another good example. And then let me move to some of the other exciting use cases.
This is awesome.
Uh,
Thanks for sharing these two demos, Mudit. It will
yeah,
really help audience to relate to the concept.
sure.
Sorry, a quick question I had. Is
Yeah.
there a possibility to extract handwritten? The document that you have shown is quite like even if it is
Mhm.
unstructured, but
Right.
the data is it's digitalized, right? It's the digital document. But any possibility out of the box where we
Yeah.
can extract handwritten documents?
Yes, yes, absolutely. So I think one of the things you can do, for example, we highly recommend if you're getting handwritten content when you're using the OCR provider. So we've got two OCR providers. We've got Abby and Google Vision. If you
Mm-hmm.
were to use Google Vision as the provider, you will be able to have handwritten content also getting extracted. So that's very, very simple way to sort of extract handwritten content. And then the other also example is that we also have, as I said, partnership with Microsoft. There is an option called Standard Forms, which is
Mm-hmm.
powered through Microsoft capability. That will probably be a webinar in itself, Dipender. But yeah,
Okay.
in and of
Mm-hmm.
itself, you can basically power it by training, similar to how you would probably do with the IQ bot today. You can
Mm-hmm.
probably train your own models to extract specific content. So that's again an option available, and it's also a very powerful model, and you can train it to extract handwritten content as well. That's also very easy to set up and
Got it.
get
Got
going.
it. So options are available, feature capability wise, it's possible and it's
Correct.
available right there. And what you see,
Yes.
have you seen what is the success percentage of the extraction in such use cases?
I feel that the models have come out very well with, especially if you're using, for example, multilingual extraction and you have a generic requirement where
Mm-hmm.
even English and non-English content is available, right? You should be able to do that very well with Google Vision OCR. It supports a wide variety of content in that sense, right? Standard forms, there are specific languages where handwritten language support is there. So that would be my only call out, but it works. It actually works very well. In my experience, it works far better in that context, just versus a pure play OCR, because with standard forms, you're actually training it also. You're kind of saying, hey, look at this area and find
Mm-hmm.
try and extract the handwritten content. So it does tend to work far better and far more accurately in that way.
Feedback as well, right?
You can
Feedback.
update your model with the feedback, and it should yeah, be able to give you results based
So thanks for sharing that. It will be really helpful.
on. Yeah. So now going back to the use case that we were talking about. So this is done. Now let me talk about somewhat of a complex use case. So this is an example of, and I'm just gonna
Sorry,
use this.
sorry to interrupt you, Mudit, once again.
Mhm.
So for the interest of the audience, like for example, you shown us the extraction, so that's fine. But
Yep.
after extraction, there is a post processing.
Yep.
Just so that the audience has a clarity. So there are pre-processing bots, and there is a pre-processing work. Then there is an extraction, and then there is a post processing. So for pre and post, you have to use your automations like
Correct.
A360.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Let me go in that, and I don't mind spending a few minutes on that.
Yeah.
So
So would you like to
every
just share the data structure or the data format we get out of the DA? Like I know it's a
correct.
JSON and CSV, but you can just maybe cover
Sure,
that for
sure,
the audience.
sure, sure. So usually what happens is that anytime you create a learning instance, right, it will create an entire process behind the scenes for you, right? So we can pick up the one as an example. If you see this, this is an entire process that's running behind the scenes for you, orchestrating your extraction. So the point, Dipendra, you were sort of alluding to was that, hey, this entire, extraction runs and you've done the validation in the screen that I was doing my validation. I'm happy with the extraction. And then what finally happens is there is a download bot that runs and it will download the extraction as a CSV file into an output folder, and it goes and sits there. And then what you are expected to do typically is that you can go ahead and take that file from that folder location and further process it downstream to your system of record, right? You will have to write an automation, almost insert a bot potentially after this, or you can imagine something like this, right? Once the validation's been done, you can insert a bot to upload it to your system of record. Just as an example, you can set it up like this, and that will take care of making sure that your information is flowing downstream to your system of record. So this is, just for reference, in my bot machine, I usually extract it, for example, in my C drive. So if I go and look at this output, there will be typically folders like the success and failed. IQ bot will actually not be there. Apologies. So yeah, there'll be just folders like success and failed, and if there is a success, you will have the extraction available here as the CSV file. I hope this makes sense. So
Yep.
uh,
So we can also extract data in the JSON format, and that also be can be consumed in
correct,
one of
correct.
the bot.
You can
Awesome.
choose to have this set up to download it as JSON. So if I were to go and actually look at this bot, I will have an option to change it as into a JSON format. Let me show you that as well. So if I go here,
So what do generally developers or like while building this kind of solution, people generally prefer CSV or JSON? What is your view there?
well, I think mostly for troubleshooting, like developers would have JSON is preferable, right? Most developers would look at that. But when they're sending the data into the system,
Mm-hmm.
it can. I've seen that people tend to use the CSV. So this is where you can,
Okay.
like, if you
Yeah.
see
Yeah.
CSV, right? So you can go ahead and set it up, and it will switch the format. So, but I mean, it's up to you. But yeah, CSV is good for immediate consumption. Let's say, right? If I want to just aggregate and the data and put it in an Excel format somewhere to be presented. But if you probably are just going to port it into a system of record, maybe JSON would be better. You can easily read through it and then map it to different fields, and put it across
Yep.
into your system. Okay, with that, now let me jump to the final piece of my demo. So this is a more complex, it's kind of a receipt. So somebody's just taken a photograph of this receipt, right? So in India, we've got this Chroma, which is where you can go ahead and buy your electronic goods, for example. So you've done all of these purchases. So if you see here, the reason why this is so interesting is there is no format, right? So in the sense, like, item description is here, item code, it's all jumbled up. Basically, it says that, okay, you can expect item description as a first line, then there is an item code, and then there is a tax somewhere that will come. So if you see that this is the tax, this is the item code, and then there is this quantity 1/EA. So the format in which these rows are coming are described one time here, and then these rows are repeating themselves in that format. So, but there is no table boundary, as you can see, right? It's like a long paper roll that is used to print this out. So there isn't any of that definition there. In this particular example, payment details does not even have this kind of a schema defined. Like in this one, I had this schema defined. Here, payment details just starts outputting the information. There is no context, there's no further information. It just sort of starts outputting. And likewise for this tax summary, this is somewhat better. This is more structured in that sense, right? But the above two examples of the table, you can see they're completely completely randomized in that sense. There is no sort of a definition of it, or no table structure well defined here, right? So we will try to extract this and see how this works from generative AI. So this is sometimes, you may think, oh, this should be an invoice, but if you really think about how the information is flowing, it's really unstructured, right? And that's where I think we have to apply our judgment. You have to look at the content and see whether it is truly semi-structured. Just because it says invoice doesn't mean it will work well with invoice, because in this example, for instance, it truly is an unstructured content rather than it being an invoice content. So we'll try to process this and we'll iterate through our learning instance and see the impact of that on the extraction. Okay.
Yeah, this would be an interesting case.
Yeah. So what I've done here, and for your audience, I have actually set up two learning instances. One which is powered by OpenAI, and one which is powered by Anthropic. I wanted to show this. So at a very high level, Anthropic has 200,000 tokens window, I think, whereas this is OpenAI has 16,000 tokens. So imagine, like, whenever you use OpenAI today, for example, we also do what is called as RAG, retrieval augmented generation. So behind the scenes, our bot is creating those embeddings to be able to process large documents, right? So that's something that's happening with OpenAI based extraction, whereas with Anthropic, we do rely on RAG to create our embeddings and really be able to direct our search queries against that VectorDB and the embeddings that are there in that. So that's something that's built in. Every time the bot would run, it will do that automatically. You don't have to worry about that. Whereas with Anthropic, one of the things that, because it has such a large context window, you don't need to do any of that. You can practically use it straight off. 200,000 is a pretty large window, so we don't need to do that. And it does help in certain use cases. Again, I would like to demonstrate for the developers how these two options are different and why you should use one or the other. I'll try to sort of touch upon that, if that makes sense, right? So let's do that and try this out now. I'm going to use this invoice that we were talking about, and we will process this with the default. So while this is processing, I'll show you the details of the learning instance in parallel. So what we are extracting now, this is a fairly large LI. I'm extracting, okay, so it's here. So I'm extracting the order number, I'm extracting the date, and that sort of content is there. So I'm extracting all of that, and then let's see, I'm extracting another one. I want to understand if the payment is matching. The payment which is there in these line items is matching the total invoice amount, right? So 5132, whether this sum of all of this is matching 5132, I want to understand that. So that's something that is also my requirement. And then I'm extracting 2 or 3 different types of tables. So if you saw in this example, there are 3 tables at least, right? One is this table, which is all the items. There is a payment details table, and then there is a tax summary table, right? So again, I've got all of these multiple tables set up, and I'm going to extract this, and we'll see how the results sort of come up, right? And then we'll iterate through and change it as needed. Okay, cool. Hopefully our request has got processed and we should have the results for it available. All right, so let's go through this. Okay, so this is the default extraction coming from OpenAI based option. So we can see that looks like it's extracting correctly. There is a coupon amount of 27. Which is being looked at. There is payment match. It does not seem to be recognizing this correctly, so we may need to change for it. This table that is there also, while it is extracting fairly well, we can see some of the things, right? So for example, here, type of delivery, it is saying STOR, which is basically code for store, right? Which means that somebody has to do a self pickup, right? So we will want to, let's say I wanted to instead of store, I wanted to have it mark it as self pickup. So we can maybe change the query for that. There is a payment type here, which is just saying INR, which is the currency code actually. So again, this is wrong. I want to understand whether this has been paid via cash or whether some card has been used. So I'll try and make some changes for that. The tax information seems to be coming pretty accurately, so there is no problem in that. Stick with that. And you can see again for payment details. So this is the great thing about, right? So if you see the payment details, right? Again, this is an example where there is absolutely no tabular context, right? I'm just asking it, give me a payment details description and the amount, right? And it's able to figure out from these rows and really route it and bring it out very, very clearly and list all of this, right? So this is very, very cool stuff, because you're dealing with headerless tables or with minimal
Yeah.
minimum context tables, I guess, right? It's not an easy thing, but with large language models, again, you're able to sort of manage that very, very easy. So let's say I did this, and now what I'll do in my next phase is I will iterate through these learning instance and show the impact of that. While I'm doing that, I will also run this once through Anthropic. Just let's see what happens with Anthropic now, right? And we'll see and compare the results of the two as well. So yeah.
Is there a possibility of switching within the same learning instance? If I've created one learning instance, I
Yes, you can just simply change the tab. Like you can select
okay,
this versus the toggle between the
okay.
two. Yeah. So this is now running. And again, as of now, I think the results may not be super different, but what I wanted to show here is that there is a option available, and sometimes you can use Anthropic to your advantage. So one of the examples which I will showcase the difference especially is with this payment match, right? How this payment match can be done more effectively with something like an Anthropic, which has more advanced reasoning capabilities, right? So we will see what our expectation is we want to sum up all of these line items and automatically understand whether this is matching the total of the invoice, right? So which is, as I was saying, this number. So there is a little bit of reasoning and little bits of computation and reasoning required for that. So in those situations, sometimes this may come better, right? So we'll see. Again, this one is coming something else, but we'll change it. We'll see after the change what results we get. So let's do this now. I'll iterate through the set of changes. See, okay, yeah. So DBD coupon amount. By the way, so the coupon amount, another one. This, if you see in this result, we got these coupon amounts. This is 16 rupees. So somebody has used certain coupons. So this is 27. So what was happening is when I'm asking is coupon, it's actually just picking up 27. But now what we'll do is we'll say, hey, no, don't just pick up 27. Give me the sum of all these coupons that have been used. And we will just do so by changing our query. So let's do that. So we can go ahead and say, okay, I'm going to change this. I want you to sum up all of the amounts titled this, right? This is a very specific ask. Don't just give me the coupon amount, but change it. And for payment match, we will also do another thing. We'll sum up all the payments that are there and indicate if there's a match or not. And we'll also ask it to return the specific payment amounts that are used, right? Sum of all the payments. So this is important. And I again, you were asking me the other time, you were asking me about what are the best practices, right? So some of these are also best practices. You can also ask the prompt, within the prompt, you can ask the model to return these values so that you also have a way to sort of understand what's happening. And I usually do that a lot to sort of troubleshoot and understand why the model is responding in a particular way. So let's do that. Additionally, okay, so let's just go ahead with this. And then a few other things that I think here, like we were talking about the delivery address, what we will say is, okay, give me the delivery address or the type of delivery, but I want it in a different format. So I'm going to just change this now. I'm going to say, what is the delivery type, and return it as self pickup or delivery. If this particular code is found, then this is a self pickup. If something like this is found, it's a delivery. So I'll make that change. And
I think we have written a conditional logic there in a simple
almost
plain English.
in plain English, exactly. And then what is the payment type? Again, I'm going to just say return cash or card rather than returning. So it will do that for me. So let me just update this now, and let's reprocess this now. And while this is running, we will do the same set of changes what we did on our Anthropic LIS. So we'll do the same set of changes.
So Anthropic is available as part of the same license pack, right? Which Automation Anywhere has for
yes. There's nothing extra in that sense. Yeah, type of delivery.
And the choice completely depends on your individual use cases, right? What you find better, you go ahead and use it.
Yes. So, and again, I think there are certain peculiarities with different models. I'll talk about it maybe towards the end. We can have a quick discussion on that. But my view is that the longer context window definitely helps Anthropic with advanced reasoning that is there. But then it's also evolutionary. Like I think that some of the more recent models that are coming up, we are finding that even GPT models are actually scaling up pretty fast and pretty well. In fact, GPT is actually outperforming many of the models that are there, especially the GPT-4 series of models. But like you're absolutely right. It depends on your use case, and there are certain general benefits of using one over the other. For example, Anthropic's claim to fame today in many ways is that there is an additional layer of security, and so you can't have malicious prompt injected into Anthropic. So there is a lot of enterprises feel more safer in that sense with when dealing with Anthropic. So that's one of the aspects there. The other aspect also with Anthropic is that it's available via GCP and AWS. So let's say if your customer is a pure play Azure, a customer, then they may be okay with OpenAI. But some of the customers, they may have long-standing relationship with GCP or AWS, and customers may prefer to use Anthropic in that context. So again, those are some of the reasons that you may consider one over the other.
Yeah.
So now, as you can see, I did this change and I am getting good result with my DBO coupon. It is actually 77 because I have, if I look at these 27, all of this, if I add it up, it does come up to 77. So it is able to do that. The payment type match, it's not yet to the mark. So we'll see what we can do about it. On the type of delivery and payment type, you can see the results are now coming perfectly fine. So again, this is all possible with just simple tweaking of the prompts that I did. And now let's also see Anthropic, right, in parallel. Now this is fine, and you can see the payment match and look at this response, right, versus OpenAI. This is more verbose. As I was saying, more advanced reasoning capabilities are now available with the latest models. I think, I expect the latest GPT model, we use GPT 3.5 right now, 3.5 Turbo. In the product. Soon we will have plan for GPT-4 as well. And I expect this to change with OpenAI very soon. I mean, within the product also, you should see the better results in that sense. But with Anthropic, you can clearly see that the reasoning is explained in a much more verbose way. And it explains why it is saying this is a match, right? And I can change my prompt. If I don't need this, I can say, okay, don't explain me. Just give me whether it's a match or not match. I can ask for specific sort of code as well. I can always do that. But this helps you as a developer kind of understand what's happening and why you're getting the results that you're getting.
Yeah. Depending on that, we can also write a conditional statement accepting this payment match as a flag. Maybe give me true if it is a match or a false, so that we reduce the extra layer of coding like in post processing.
So
really cool.
That's there. So all right, and now in some of the other items, I think the others would be fairly similar. So yeah, this is perfectly working fine, and you can see the rest of the information is extracted correctly as well. I do have one more example of a difference between the two, and let me just process these two. This another document to just showcase where OpenAI works differently. So I'll just process it and then I'll go over the document with you. Let me do that. I'll just submit this and then come back. Yeah, so while it processes it in the background, I will review the document. All right, so let's go into that now. Yeah, so this is an invoice or a receipt rather. I think it's really a similar format if you see. But one thing difference here is that if you see, within payment details, there was cash used and then there is a change that was returned in this table, which is actually a negative number, right? So one of the things that we want to again, we will see this, that when we see the results between OpenAI and between Anthropic, there is a slight difference here. And I think, again, just the very nature of these models, there will always be these kind of differences. And as a best practice, it's always good, like I was explaining, always good to test it out, make sure that the results are up to the mark from your perspective. But okay, so this is, in this particular example, in this invoice, there is no coupon that was used. But you can see when I'm looking at it from an OpenAI perspective, again, it's just returning me the amount. There's no reasoning. There's nothing that I'm getting here. And then the other thing which you are also seeing here is it is detecting a payment which is made, but it's not detecting the negative payment, which, it is ignoring that, right? And in this example, again, if I look at it from Anthropic perspective, that will not be the case. Yeah. So here, if you see here, it is actually taking the negative as well. So again, these are some of these, I guess, finer points that it may be possible that if I further tweak my prompt, maybe it starts detecting that. It's possible. But then out of the box, it is quite clear that there is a difference between the way the two models are sort of responding. So yeah, that's something that you can consider as well.
So what are the chances, like let's say I have defined or I have a designed prompt, for that prompt every time it will give me the same set of result, will not be there a variation? Like how we can probably make sure that there should not be a variation once we have fine-tuned our prompt and we see that this prompt is the one that I need.
Right. So generally speaking, for the kind of document content like this one I'm talking about here, it should generally not change. But yeah, there are a few occasions, right? Like I think there are times when if you see that happening, one of the things that we do, for example, is we also highly recommend to put in a certain set of validation to catch hold of that. And that should allow you to make sure that, okay, if your response is in a way deviating from the standard that you were expecting, then you sort of catch hold of that and make sure that some human is looking at it. And testing becomes super critical, Depender. I think in this context, the more you test with your sample workload, the more confidence you will have. We do expect, as these models are evolving, and we hope to see in future potentially even having some sort of confidence score for these responses from these models. Today there isn't one, but I think there is effort going on both in the open source community and in the hyperscalers, with the hyperscalers that are building these models, where they are looking at having some sort of a confidence available. So again, all of these should help hopefully in future. And today, though, I think the best way to handle it is, if you have a certain standard in mind, make sure you're validating it against that standard and catching hold of anything that sort of deviates from that standard and routing it to a human to validate.
So would it be a right statement to say, like, the DA solutions take less of a development time but more of a tester's time? Just on a
Yeah, I
final
mean, and not just DA, I think any technology using generative AI, you would find that to be the case, right? And also, you, like I said, I think the amount of, okay, so one of the things for me, what I've observed is that every time I keep the prompt very, very specific, there is a very much lesser chance of it actually hallucinating. Like, for example, the first prompt that we did, where we were asking for this kind of answer, there's a very, very specific instruction attached. So the chance for us to get a very different kind of a response is much lower. So there are things that are in control with the developer. I wouldn't say it's 100% tested. Yeah, there is I mean, for you to have the confidence on your solution, you definitely need elaborate testing. But the part which you control as a developer is having these prompts created in a way, engineered in a way rather, that you kind of don't let the model make those assumptions, right? I mean, if a model is kind of assuming things, then of course, then the chances of you getting a undeterministic response is far higher.
Yeah, that's correct. So yeah, I think we're done, right, with the demo. Okay. So my question would be, like, you showed us the capability of Anthropic, you showed this thing, OpenAI. So is there a, like, how user may decide, like, is there a best practice or a standard approach already available? So these are the cases, boss, go with this model. These, for certain, these set of use case, go with this model. Anything you would like to share, if there is already available data from which developers can benefit?
No, that's a great question. I have some content available here which I think should help. So today, with generative AI within the context of document automation, as I said, we are using GPT 3.5 Turbo. It's available since last year. It's been in GA for a very long time. The primary provider there is OpenAI. Models used via Azure. We do use RAG, as I was explaining, to use RAG. Without RAG, in a single context, context, think of it like how much memory your prompts would have to operate within, right? So if you're dealing with a 16,000 token, you're talking something like 10 to 12 pages in a single context. So which is where it becomes impossible, because we realize that we need to now have a RAG service built in so that customers can process longer documents. So there is a little bit of RAG requirement with GPT 3.5 Turbo, but that shouldn't be a problem for you as a developer. But as I said, just keep in mind that there a little bit of, sometimes you may see a little bit of higher time, turnaround time in terms of getting the response. Then I think the use cases around unstructured and semi-structured document data, they're definitely something that's possible with 3.5 Turbo. You can very much use it. The GPT models work very well when you've got these text content and you're really prompting it against the textual content. We expect them to continue to sort of make progress even with GPT-4. I think core extraction use cases where you're just dealing with text, right? All the stuff that I covered today, whether it was around unstructured, whether it was asking for specific codes like the self pickup example, answering the time difference, right? These are simpler use cases rather. Whereas I think if you're looking at something like Anthropic, which is powered by Claude 3.0 model, the big difference there is the context window is high. So suddenly you've gone from 10 to 12 pages to 200,000 context window. And in that case, RAG really becomes optional. We don't use RAG by default, for example, for any of the extraction there. And it helps, the larger context window sometimes helps in your use cases, right? So one example that comes to my mind and, is, let's say, you're dealing with a tax document, and you have tax information about a particular transaction being mentioned on multiple different pages, and you want all of that to come together in one single extraction outcome. In that sort of situation, for example, you may find that a Claude 3.0 model may work much better, because just to the fact that it has a very large context window. 160
Mm-hmm.
pages is pretty large. And whereas a RAG may not always give you that much optimum result, it will work, but it may not give you as optimum a result as you would expect. So those sort of use cases. And then I think there is, like I said, there is a general perception. Also, I think there is some data. Anthropic does claim to have certain data that there are more built-in safety mechanisms within these models, right? And the Anthropic models do tend to explain the why of the response better, right? That's again something that seems to be something we notice as well. I do think that eventually, though, if you ask me, my personal view is that most of these large models would come at par with each other in the long run. Definitely that's going to happen. But in the short term, you can probably observe these trade-offs in certain situations. And the final model, which we are now, I think this is a planned one, GPT-4o, which has around 128,000 tokens on it. Again, we are planning to have that available sometime in October this year. This is subject to change. It's part of the release. Hopefully, we'll have this available as part of our October cycle. One of the things to call out with this is that we, these newer models will also now have vision capability. So whether it is GPT-4o or whether it is Claude, there are vision capabilities. Now, in our planned roadmap, we do want to start using these vision capabilities. So right now, that's something that will help. So for example, a use case like signature detection or a stamp detection, right? Can be easily done if you have these vision capabilities available and used. Like you saw, we have a search query today where you can sort of type in your prompts. If we start using the vision capabilities, you can create those prompts and ask those questions. Hey, do you see detect a signature anywhere on the document, for example, right, and get a response. So those sort of use cases become possible, and that's something that again we are investing in, and we should have it available in the product very soon as well. So again, that's something that I'm very excited about, and hopefully we'll have that available very, very soon for our developers.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for sharing a detailed comparison on this, Mudit. I think it would really help the audience and everybody to understand what are the different models Automation Anywhere is also trying to build in or incorporate into DA. And one more question, probably last one, that's related to, like, not related to the Gen AI capability of DA. It is more to do with in general. Like, for example, if I have created a learning instance and I want to decide whether to go with standard forms or a pre-trained AI model. So how bring your own key model. So how a developer can decide on these? Any best practices? Again, any guidance available so that they can rely on and they can choose it from.
Right. So, I mean, look, I think the way to think about it is the worlds of standard form, for example, it's like I was explaining earlier, similar to IKEA, you got to keep spending effort to train, right? Whereas our approach with document automation's largely been around letting the feedback sort of be the active driver of this learning, right? So for a model, when you look at anything that comes out of Automation Anywhere today, we give a default output. Let's say if you're trying to extract 10 fields, maybe 5 get extracted with these default models, and then anything additional, you would go ahead and learn from the validations that the user is doing. It will constantly keep on improving. So 5 fields would become 7, 7 would become 8 and 9, and then that's really where it plays. So a typical simpler way, I mean, for your audience to understand this is that, let's say I'm dealing with a large format or large universe of documents, it will be much easier to use this sort of feedback based learning, because I will test my document data set with maybe, when I'm going live, I may test it with a few hundreds of documents. But then I know my customers would deal with large volumes of documents, and whatever I want, I don't want to keep spending that effort, right? As a developer, I want it to, the system to sort of self-learn and drive, data extraction accuracy on its own. So I want that to happen. So in those situations, they're better off in using Automation Anywhere with feedback as an option. Automation Anywhere, both pre-trained model and even for that matter, even using what we call as user-defined, they can use that. And then some of the options that are now available with standard forms would still require customers to keep spending effort in training. But then there are use cases where you want highly deterministic output. You want to know from where to extract, what to extract, and you're ready to spend that effort for certain use cases. So I think that in those use cases, you can continue to sort of build these models with using some of these standard forms. And I think we talked about GenAI all this while. I think where to use GenAI, I mean, definitely unstructured use cases, right? Where you're dealing with unstructured content is a great fit for that. And as things would evolve, I think you would also find that even with documents which are not relatively, which you can technically not say that okay, these are unstructured documents, but they're more complex documents. Maybe using a GenAI capability still makes a lot of sense, because today we saw that clearly that a receipt which has no structure to it can be extracted much more easily with pure play GenAI. Because it essentially the definition of unstructured can be different. What we see just looking at the document versus how the system perceives are two different things, right?
Yeah.
So it's important to keep that in mind. So if you're dealing with complex documents, you're not getting good results, you do have now option with GenAI. Very powerful option to use there, and really try it out in those use cases as well. So yeah, we have, with document automation, we have a ecosystem. We've got multiple options available, and as I said, you would have to take a call on, depending on the type of document you're dealing with and the amount of effort that you want to spend in sort of iterating through and managing that. If you want a very highly deterministic response, you're ready to spend that effort, you have one option. If you rather don't want to do that and you want to create something more generic, you can use automation anywhere options, which can scale with feedback. And for more complex documents, for example, you can potentially look at generative AI, or even for unstructured documents, you can look at generative AI based extraction. So plethora of options, but yeah, of course, the choice is always yours, and to make and decide what's best for you.
Yeah, I think, that makes sense. And thanks a lot, Mudit, for walking us through all those demos and those stuff, really cool stuff, which people can do with, obviously,
Sure.
with the help of, with the capability of Gen AI blended together with DA, right? So it's a
Yes.
really cool stuff. Yeah. Thank you so much, Mudit, for joining me and walking us through all those demos and the capabilities of DA, specifically with GenAI. I think it will help the audience. And if they want to try their hands, they probably just have to wait if they are using Community Edition. However, they can very well use all these features in the enterprise version. It is already available at this moment. For the audience, if they would like to comment or they have any queries or questions, please reach out to me in the comment section, and we'll try to address your queries. Thanks a lot, Mudit, for your time. And yeah, it's a
Thank you.
really useful session. I believe it's a value add for the audience who are looking around the capabilities. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dipendra. Really appreciate the opportunity, and look forward for us to collaborate further. And like you said, if you have any questions, please post it to Dipendra, and I'll be happy to come back and address them as well. Thank you so much.
Superb. Thank you so much. Have a great day.